Welcome to the Popcorn Talk Network, for the online broadcast network that features movie discussion, news, and interviews. Press 1. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. From the Popcorn Talk Network and producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, and Phil Svitek, this is iTalk Movies. Long-form interviews with leading members of the film industry. And now, your host of iTalk Movies.
Hi, welcome to iTalk Movies on the Popcorn Talk Network. I'm Lee Epstein. You can follow us on Twitter at The Popcorn Talk, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Popcorn Talk Network. My guest today is David Dastmalchian, whose new film Animals will be in theaters May 15th.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for
David.
having me.
Yeah, thanks
Good
for
to
being
be
here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So why don't we start off by explaining to folks what Animals is about?
Great. Animals, it's a film that I wrote, I acted in, I produced it. I also, did boxes and helping with catering and every other job you can have on a film. But it's about...
Sounds glamorous.
Yeah, very glamorous filmmaking. It's set in Chicago. It's a love story about a couple, Jude and Bobby, who live in their car. They are addicts. They're heroin addicts, and so their life day to day is this struggle to put together enough cash to get their next fix. And they live in this kind of day to day hustle, struggling through their addiction, while at night they live in this fantasy of the dream of the life that they have for themselves, far beyond the world in which they now live. And then one of them gets sick, and they kind of have to decide and figure out where they're going from there. But yeah, it's a love story.
I have to say, I mentioned this to you just briefly before, but I'm also from a family that has a heroin addiction and recovery story. My brother Jared is a recovering addict, and we actually watched the movie together, and it was a really powerful experience to see it together, I have to tell you, and it's a big credit to you. But the main first thing he said after this, I said, "So what did you think?" And he said, "It was spot on. It was so accurate." I mean, there were so many parallels to his personal experience and story, and I'm sure to many, many other people who might be watching or know someone who might have a similar story. And it was just, to your credit, I mean, he just said, I've never seen anything in art, in film, in television where I'm like, this is so spot on. And the little pieces, he really responded to, the little nuances, little details. He said, wow, that was really, and I don't want to give too much away or to
Sure.
describe it, that won't do it justice, but just to give you that genuine compliment, but also to hear what you have to say about how you were able to create a film like that was so spot on, and perhaps how it's related to your own experience.
Sure. Thanks, man. And thanks. And it was a pleasure. I got to meet your brother actually briefly, and he's just a really lovely guy. And
Thank you.
I was really grateful for the things that he said about the movie, because it's what we set out to do. You know, Collin, who directed it, and basically every other member of the production team, as hard as it is to believe, because the probability that it's going to be a part of people's lives is much higher than I think a lot of us realize. But everyone on the production team really had no experience in that world or in an understanding of that. So I was not only like the writer and actor in the film and producer, but I was also kind of like the on-set consultant for the addiction stuff. And
like the drug use
itself, everything. And so when we went to make the movie, and when I wrote the script, you know, like I said, I wanted to write about love. I wanted to write a story about love, about two people who need each other, who are in that terrible, beautiful place where you love someone so much, but you don't know, is this killing me? Where do I... And so the framing device through which we told the story was that of two addicts, because that is something I know and understand really well. And it's a narrative that I feel like is in a metaphorical sense very, very exemplary of all of those things that you go through, especially in the difficult stages of love and what you have to let go of. So we wrote the film, I wrote the film, and we went to make the film with my experience. You know, I spent 5 years as a full-time opiate addict, a heroin addict, and I, you know, by the grace of God and a lot of miracles, was able to get out of that life and to find a new life and to find sobriety. It would be 13 years this May.
Wow, congratulations.
And thank you. And I knew that this subject matter had been dealt with really well in film before. It's been dealt with in all forms of storytelling, fiction, in biography, in television, in film. It's been really well done. So when Collin Schiffli, who directed the film, we went to make the film, and our producers on board, it was like, what do we have to offer that's different? What do we have to offer that makes our attempt to throw our hat in the rings legitimate? And one of the things that we had going into that was that it's, inspired by, and a lot of it was derived from my own personal life experience. Also, the fact that we felt like there is an element of hope and beauty. As difficult as this film may be for certain people to watch at points, there are themes of love, hope, and beauty that I think are very important if there's any message that I ever would have about addiction, because addiction it's all over, and it's in every which way. It's everything from drugs to alcohol to shopping to sex to work. You can find it in our culture and in our world in every manifestation. But the thing that's important to me in telling a story like this and exploring these themes of love is that we don't give up on people. You cannot give up on human beings. That's the big issue, I think, at stake right now. A lot of people, after so long, are kind of marginalized out to the edges, and it's next to nearly impossible to make it back in. And it requires a village, It's why I'm here today.
Yeah, no, and I know that's true for my brother as well, and lots of other people. One of the questions I guess I have, based on something that you said that you feel like the film will be a bigger part of people's lives, or maybe more people's lives than you might have realized. What do you mean by that?
Well, audience-wise,
Yeah.
I think that first of all, I think that the themes and that the struggles that the characters are facing in the film is something that, whether somebody walks into a movie theater or is watching it at their home and they have ever been around needles, or they've ever been around heroin, or they've ever been around some of the things that you see in this film, I hope, if we did our job right, that people understand that sense of obsession, that sense of feeling tethered to something that is bringing you down, and that the authenticity that comes out in the way that Collin made the film, and the way that Kim portrays her character, the way that all the things come through in the film, that people will feel a sense of reflection in there, and also that it is, in its face value, an issue and a problem, as you well know, that is so much more far-reaching than I think people are aware right now.
For sure.
It's the numbers are really staggering, but the number of people, especially, here's the really one of the many weird, interesting things about this subject is, for years, it was always relegated to, like, that is something that is abused and dealt with by people who are like musicians, or it's an urban problem, which in its own way has a lot of socioeconomic and kind of racial, like, negative undertones that has always been masking the true problem that opiate addiction is everywhere, man. And it's sad that it requires it to flare up in the suburban communities to get as much attention as it needs, but that's
Right.
what's happening right now. I am a member of a lot of different communities, just to people who are involved in recovery, and I hate to say it, but I feel like every morning when I wake up, there's a new message somewhere in the country. People are losing their lives, and that's the inexcusable part. Like, we have the resources to keep addicts alive.
We can stop this. This is a fixable problem.
Getting them clean, getting an addict to want to be clean, that requires a lot, and I can't sit here and explain how that works, but I do know that we can keep people alive long enough to get the desire to want to get clean,
Yeah, I definitely think my experience watching the film and seeing, having been in a family and lived through, being a codependent is a word that people use a lot, but being someone who's in a family with someone who is actively using, I think something for me that was powerful in watching this film was that the whole time that I was in my role as the sibling, as the codependent, let's say, the person who was not using, but who was deeply affected by it, I was never in the room. I was never in the bathroom. Like, the scenes of the movie, flash into my mind.
Sure.
I was never in the bathroom at a diner when my brother, let's say, was using, or living in the car with him and his girlfriend, things at that time, seeing, I never had to see those things.
Sure.
And I think, especially for those of us who have been affected by addiction, which is almost all of us, really, when we start talking about it more openly, as you kind of alluded to, those of us who are affected by it but aren't necessarily the active addict,
Yeah.
not only don't see it because it's being kept from us by the person who's using, but because we keep ourselves from it because it's scary.
Sure.
And so when I watched your film and I thought, oh my God, this is giving me insight into my own family, into our own story, because it's a real honest glimpse and, substantiated by what my brother said, this is really honest.
Yeah.
That I said, wow, these are the parts that I was afraid to even look at.
Sure.
And now I'm seeing it in animals in your film, and I'm saying, oh yeah, this is really crazy.
And we see the addict in their element. We see them in the just degrading and difficult and sad circumstances through which many people are using. And also, I hope, again, if we do our jobs correctly, you are seeing that reflection of like humanity and love.
Definitely.
And you're looking at these people like true human beings. It's I fall prey to it just like every other person does. If I'm walking through Penn Station in New York, or if I'm downtown in LA, or I'm in my own neighborhood and I walk around a guy who's sitting on the sidewalk, I don't know. I don't have the answer. How do we get that guy up and get him going? But I will say that I've been kind of trained into putting on the blinders to just exist and move around him and that's in its own way a kind of violence, a kind of abuse in our society. That it's tricky, man. There's no simple answers, and that's one of the wonderful freedoms you have in independent filmmaking and working with people like Collin and the rest of the team on this film. We did not set out to answer any of these questions. We definitely set out to pose some big questions about the general big theme, like I said, love, and then dealing with addiction, dealing with homelessness, dealing with people who are in this state. I think hopefully it will spark a lot of conversation.
Well, it's clear that you're not just an actor, just a writer. You really are mindful of the power and the impact that you can have. I mean, it sounds that way just listening to you now, that you really want to make some sort of difference, even if you don't have the answers and can't fix it all.
Right. I definitely don't have the answers. Like I said, the message to me, we got to keep people alive. We don't give up on people. There's so many resources out there for people that want help. And for every person who finds their way back to the healthy life, who finds a way back to sobriety and freedom from the chains of all that, it's so specific and it's so different. There are definitely basic, simple things that I think thread a lot of us together. But even that is like, it's like if you're ill and you go to your doctor, he's going to come up with a plan for you. But you have to have that willingness to want to go to the doctor, and you have to have the help and support of your friends. And if you don't have your friends anymore, your family anymore, then your society at large that can step in and help. But I think, on your point, I can't do this with every film, obviously. Everything I've written or that I will write definitely comes from a personal place. I don't think I will be as probably interested in or willing to discuss as much in the future how personal like a lot of my stories come from. But this one in particular, I spent a very long time saying to Collin, to our producers, to my wife, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want it addressed. If people ask, just a script David wrote, because this is a secret that I kept for a very long time.
Wow.
We were in production, and each one of the people who I cared deeply with, and that's how you go make a movie like this. You have to surround yourself with people. Each person that was on this journey with me sat down at a certain point and said, it's going to come up. Obviously, you're going to sit in this scenario, and people are going to say, where do you come up with that story? So either prepare us now, and we'll all be prepared to help you lie or hide
Stay
or navigate around
it.
that, or we believe you. This is a moment that you have to embrace. You've got almost at that point 11 years. It's you should be very proud of what you've accomplished, and it authenticates and helps you to like really discuss what's going on here and why you have a right to throw your hat in this storytelling ring. And so I thought a lot about it, and I spent a lot of time really, kind of worrying about it. And then I was in a circumstance like this, just walking with the reporter in Chicago right when we were in the middle of shooting, and sure enough, she turned to me at one point and said, "So this script, I haven't read it yet, but it sounds pretty intense. Where did you come up with this idea?" And I just had this moment where I looked up and I thought, okay, here we go. And I started talking about it, and it was very liberating. It was very freeing, and the power of storytelling it's a beautiful thing, man. Whether it's for this or the escapism the storytelling can bring, or just that sense that people can go watch a movie for an hour and a half, and even if for 5 minutes in there they feel a little less alone. That's what I love about what I do.
And I can't imagine. Imagine if we were sitting here and we were going to not talk about your story. I mean, we would just talk about niceties about a movie, and it would be all like polite, and like the impact that you're having by sharing and coming out or telling your story, whatever phrase you want to use, is tremendous.
Thanks,
honestly,
man. Thanks, man. Again, like I see a lot, if an addict or people out there whose families are, anybody who's got any form of it touching or affecting their lives, it's great because, if anything, because I have a lot of people say, well, how did you do? How do you? And I am very wary of answering that because I feel like, gosh, man, and my journey was so quick, but you could have found yours. But what I can say is, look at me now. I have a wife and a son that I love. I have a career that I love. I'm doing the exponential amount of joy that I experience every year as I get older and further into this path is beyond like mathematical calculation. I am not joking when I say that, like, every year I look back and go, wow, it's 11 years under my belt, 12 years under my belt. It just doesn't mean life doesn't have its bumps. Doesn't mean life doesn't have its difficulties or its obstacles or all the things that I have to overcome and work my way through. But my goodness, it's just... so, and if anything, they look up and they go, well, I know he ain't lying. I know he really lived down in the bottom of the well. And now he's sitting on this, set talking about a passion
This isn't a set.
project.
This is totally real. This is.
I know, you're right. Yeah. The city looking great out
right
there.
here, downtown.
I see Batman on the top of that building. You see him up there? Yeah.
Well, that's a good
he's
transition.
waving
You
at
were
us.
in a Batman movie.
I was. I was in the Batman movie, one of the Batman movies. I feel like one of the best. I think one of the greatest films, in my opinion, my humble opinion. I was a part of it, but it just one of the best films made. I love that movie. It's
and
beautiful.
also that's an example. A young white famous actor died, not necessarily from the same thing, but from addiction related or drug related issues, and that again, like what you were saying, kind of sometimes unfortunately has taken that kind of event to get people to see this is not only limited to certain populations, and it really cuts across.
It's everywhere in every place, and it's and I don't know why. I don't know why it has to exist. I don't know why it's part of the human condition. There's a lot of things I don't understand why they're part of the human condition, but that's one especially when it costs lives. The suffering that it imposes is already bad enough, but when it takes lives, I have several friends who are years into either recovery or some who never were, who have lost their children. Looking at like the loss of a 20-year-old. I've got a friend who has been he himself was like a businessman. He went into recovery after he had to go to prison. I mean, this guy has an amazing journey. His name's Tim Ryan. He's actually out in Illinois, and he I think he was on his 2-year anniversary of being clean. He lost his son, and I think why does this exist? I don't know. But there's in the more extreme version of storytelling, we have our superheroes who can battle the villains, and that's an interesting way to explore these kinds of stories too.
Interesting. Do you think that's related to your interest in that kind of work?
Absolutely. I think since I was a kid, first of all, I've always loved comic books. I have since the third grade. I wandered into a 7-Eleven in Overland Park, Kansas, and there was a spinning rack.
OP.
Yeah, that's where I grew up. OP, repping it hard. And there was an Avengers cover that was breathtaking. It was like all the Avengers facing down like an unseen foe. It's as they were building up to, I think, the Secret Wars story line. But I got it, and I took it home, and I tried drawing it and tracing it. I still have it. You can still see the outline of where I traced it. In fact, Stan Lee signed it for me to my son as a gift, which was pretty cool. And I fell into that world of the comic book world, as well as in the DC realm. Always obsessed with the Joker. I always thought he was such an amazing character, and so I spent a lot of time, and I think that those stories are contemporary. You want to get all Joseph Campbell about it, or all Sigmund Freud about it. It's very
get Sigmund Freud about it.
Sigmund
Go
Freud
there.
It's the myth. It's man's way of working through these things, and we do it in big symbolic metaphors. And kids get it. Kids understand much more than we give them credit for.
Mm-hmm.
Kids understand that there are these inexplicable struggles that have been going on since the dawn of time. We don't know why, and so you break it down into its simplest fashion. You've got Ulysses versus all the monsters of Greek mythology. You've got Superman versus Lex Luthor. You've got Batman and the Joker. You've got Ant-Man versus all of the enemies that he's going to battle in his movies to come, and in the comic books.
But you're actually in an Ant-Man movie
and now
to
I get
come.
to be a part of that world. It's I love that. I think it's a great way to. I think, and it's so cool to me that it's like contemporary. They are our contemporary myths. You know, these are our like great campfire stories, but they now have the capacity and the ability to tell them at such an amazing level. And for me to be on those sets and around these highly talented, highly imaginative people who have all the resources at their fingertips to create these worlds, it's a dream, man. It is a real, true dream come true.
It really sounds like, people who can hear you tell both parts of this story can see, like you said, being able to see a person who loves what they do and have all these things for which they're grateful comes from living a healthy life, and that you're able to have these things that are like amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, what a miracle. If these opportunities had presented themselves to me years past, A, I wouldn't have been enjoying them the way that I'm able to now, but B, I mean, who knows if I would have made it through to enjoy them. I'm so lucky. Luck is a tricky word for me. I like to say blessed, but I do believe in luck in my own way.
Gotcha. Totally gotcha.
But I have that. Yeah. I mean, one of the greatest nights of my life was standing on set in Atlanta when we were doing there was a big sequence being shot for Ant-Man that took place at the Pym Laboratories, and they had all kinds of cool set action stuff happening and everything. And they invited my wife and my son to come to set that night. The producers did, and they brought them in, and I got to walk around with my, at that point he was 6-7 months old boy, and kind of hold him up in this incredible world in which Daddy was getting to play.
Amazing. What are you playing, and what are you allowed to tell us about your Ant-Man character?
Look around, because they have little ants everywhere, and they actually have little cameras on them, and they can spy.
No, they're not ants, dude. They're mice. Trust me. It's the mouse. It's not the ant.
You'd be amazed. An ant can kick a mouse's butt, actually. So
don't tell the mouse. Yeah.
What am I allowed to say? Oh yeah. So I play in Ant-Man.
I'm an actor. I'm not a PR guy. Leave me alone.
I play Kurt. What's really cool about Kurt and about all the characters in this film is he is an individual who has a certain set of skills and gifts. Those skills and gifts absolutely could be used and utilized to forward the cause of good, if you will, in a story. But they could also be exploited for evil if so chosen. And I think that's one of the themes that kind of runs through a lot of the superhero stories, but especially with Ant-Man, what's great about like Paul Rudd's character is Scott Lang is he's somebody that you're like, he's really good at what he does, which is maybe not a great thing considering it's gotten him into a lot of trouble before the film begins, but he's continually posed with which direction do I go? Which way do I want to go? So that's Kurt. Kurt is part of a crew that includes some amazing, wonderful, talented guys. Michael Pena, who plays Luis, and T.I., who plays Dave. So the three of us together form a crew, and I think, what we do and how we involve ourselves with our particular sets of skills are a big part of Ant-Man's adventure. But whether that's for good or for bad, I guess you have to see.
Well, that's, I think, what you were alluding to in terms of the deep core human aspect of this whole kind of genre, right? Is like, that's how it is in real life. It's not either black or white, or you're bad or you're good.
Right,
a lot of us, all of us have that some kind of element or traits or abilities that can be this much between bad and good, and we have to choose where they're going to go.
Bad and good, they're such definitive terms that don't really apply much to our real world, but that's a wonderful thing about these extreme comic book heroes is that they were striving for that, and we all want that, and at the end of the day too, what's really fun about my character and the guys that I get to play with is that they're just there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of goofiness, and there's a lot of fun to be had, which I think comes right out of the source material being those Marvel comics, in the way that Stan and the rest of those guys created that world in which major action sequences are completely, coupled with some very funny quips between heroes,
Yeah, so let's talk about, speaking about working in the ensemble, like that was the Ant-Man ensemble. This film is a pretty small cast, relative, right? The Animals film that...
Going back to Animals,
but there's some big, awesome names in here, like John Hurd, who my generation remembers a lot from Home Alone, and a lot of other things, but...
Kevin!
Yes. I mean,
John Hurd, wonderful, wonderful actor. We sent him the script. Collin wanted him to play the role of Albert, which is a really important role, as you know, and but not a lot of scenes. But he has a crucial part in the story.
Totally.
And he is an amalgam of a lot of people in my life. You know, they say in Tennessee Williams' Streetcar Named Desire, I think Stella says, or not Stella, it's Blanche says, "I've always relied on the kindness of strangers." There's a truth in that. The kindness of strangers can be the good Samaritans, the angels that show up on your path that help you get home. So,
which is what we won't give too much away, but
he represents that for sure, and he did such a wonderful job. I actually just spoke with him yesterday about it. He's and it was great, exciting for us because we grew up watching him in Big and Home Alone, and I mean I loved his arc on The Sopranos and lots of other. He's a fabulously talented actor. But he was great in it. Yeah, you're right. It's a very small, like, core cast. Me and Kim Shaw, who plays Bobby, and she's just incredible. And then it's populated with this cast of other actors. And John Hurt and Kim Shaw are the only people who came in from out of town to Chicago, except for myself. I lived in Chicago forever, so all those actors that populate the rest of the film who are so brilliant are Chicago actors.
Wow, that's amazing.
And Hurt has a Chicago background, which is great.
It's amazing how many people here in LA and Hollywood do connect through Chicago and through Chicago theater in particular, which I know you have a connection to. Just wanted to ask you about that. It's called Shattered Globe Theater Chicago.
Yeah.
Why don't you just tell me a little bit more about
Very
that?
proud. Globe is been around over 2 decades in Chicago. I first saw them when I moved to Chicago. They had a great storefront space. It was on Halstead, and you go into a dark room, and you're there with maybe 50 to 100 other people. At that point, I think it was in folding chairs. Maybe there was pew seating. And you watch incredible stories being told by incredible actors who have nothing generally to utilize at their disposal to tell the story other than the source material in their own imaginations. And I was very fortunate that they brought me into their fold, and I got to do some of my favorite plays. And they're a risky theater company that did a lot of work that was maybe edgier or that was definitely gritty. A lot of 20th century American stuff. You know, they're kind of masters at all that great material. So I got to do a number of plays with them, several Tennessee Williams plays, and I did a Sam Shepard play, Buried Child. It was I want to say it was the last full theatrical production that I did, other than I do some children's theater stuff with some friends of mine around LA. But it's the last time I was really up on the boards, like having a long, run, and it was a highlight of my work for me. Yeah.
Cool. And now you're doing mostly film work.
Mostly film and some television, and I do want to get back on the stage. I've actually written something for the stage that we're trying to get into development back in Chicago. I'd love to see it get produced in Chicago. But I've been really fortunate, man. I'm a very blessed person. I've gotten to work with some amazing directors on both the indie front and the studio level as an actor, and I think that that's all I ever really. That's what I wanted. I mean, that was my dream when I came to Los Angeles, or when I set out to work in this industry.
So your gratitude and humility just like oozes out of you, and it's really beautiful, and I feel it, and hopefully people at home can feel it too. But it's really true. No, it's true, and you're also, I mean, one of the friendliest, warmest guys I've ever met. But your character.
What time is this over?
Exactly.
Screw this guy.
Exactly.
Just kidding. Thank you. You're very nice.
No, and nice. I'm sure it's partly because you're from Kansas, but it's also that you, I think what's
you
interesting.
Don't know Kansas. We're the hardest. We're the toughest, man.
Well, you're from Overland Park. That's the Kansas side, not the Missouri side.
That is the Kansas side,
Okay.
yes. In fact, Rudd's from Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas as well, which is funny. We had a lot of good stories to share with one another when we were working on Ant-Man.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we grew up like miles away from each other. We both worked at the same shopping mall.
Oh, man, mall stories.
Yeah.
Well, so in real life, you're like a really, really lovely, warm, special person, and your characters are often pretty dark. Like, would you say?
No, not at all. Absolutely not. I think I've gotten to play some wonderful characters. I mean, that's the writing. When you're an actor, you are completely at the mercy of what you get to audition for, who's going to cast you in it, and whose writing are you going to get to bring to life. And I've just been phenomenally fortunate in that I've gotten to go in for opportunities to read for directors with material that I think is just outstanding. And So I'm assuming you're referring to some of the characters I may have played in the past that some people might think of as dark or as twisted or as whatever. But I think if you step back and you really look at them overall, they're generally either misunderstood or they are, in their own way, trying to work towards actually something that we would consider good or maybe positive. At least that's the intention that I've taken with them. And then either they've been manipulated, they've been abused, they've been beaten down. But I know what you're saying, and yes, there has been like a world in which I have explored a lot of characters, and somebody said to me, you play a lot of like kind of crazy people. Some people say that they come up to me like on the wherever randomly, if someone will
We're going to say subway, and then it's like, we don't have a subway.
Were you the crazy guy in such and such? Were you the crazy? And I mean, you can call him that, sure. But I really, it's such an honor, and these characters, I think they're only interesting and effective if you've really understood like the why and what they're trying to do. And my goodness, I think of that. It would be difficult for me ever to watch the film again because I have a child now. But in Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, if you've seen the film, but like that guy's pretty. If you just met him, maybe in his element, you might be scared of him. But he's trying to actually help contribute to figuring out what's going on and getting these children back. He just never gets the opportunity to say that.
I think that's part of what's powerful about Animals, just since that's kind of why we're here, which is that. What it really shows, what I find powerful about it, is that they're not bad people. No. It really shows, and they're trying to actually do the right thing and be better.
Yeah, I've been around a while. I've yet to meet the bad person. I don't believe they exist. I believe I have seen some despicable behavior in others. I've seen some horrible behavior in myself. But I don't believe I've met the human being, and maybe they exist out there. He or she might be walking the earth, and they scare me if they do, and that's why we live in, and we can tell ghost stories, and we live in fear of these things. But I have seen the human animal is at its core trying to connect. We're all trying to do something good, and then it's just what steers that off. What causes that thing to The motivation is I don't think anybody's born and walks out into the day going, I'm going to go wreak havoc on the world. Now, all the greatest villains have, Iago, my goodness, he's a sociopath and he's got mental illness, but he's been wronged in his eyes, man. And think about what's terrifying about the Joker is that guy talk about mentally ill. And I loved that whole plot device they used in The Dark Knight where it's like, what was his backstory? Because if you could just understand what happened to him as a kid, we'd really be able to crack the code. And that you thought you got it, and then you realized he did this all the time. That's terrifying. Yeah, that's a bad guy. Whoever the Joker really is a bad person. But I don't believe they walk around on this earth.
David Dastmalchian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So nice sitting down with you.
That was a pleasure.
Let's let you have a chance to tell folks at home how they can find you online, Twitter, etc., etc.
Great. At Dastmalchian is generally where you'll be able to find me on Twitter, on Instagram. I hope that you'll go to our website for our film, which is animalsthefilm.com. You can find everything there about screenings and how to purchase the movie at home and DVDs. And then I do have a Facebook page that's set up for the film too, so you can find our Animals Facebook page where me and Collin are updating it every day.
Cool. Thank you, David, very much.
Thank you.
You can follow us online on Twitter at The Popcorn Talk. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/The Popcorn Talk Network. No, I said it wrong. youtube.com/Popcorn Talk Network. No the. I'm working on it. Yeah.
No the.
Drop your articles. Anyway, I'm Lee Michael Epstein. You can follow me online at Lee M. Epstein. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of iTalk Movies on the Popcorn Talk Network.
Producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, Christian Harloff, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network. We would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network. Are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.